Well, good evening and welcome to this live stream event on the 29th of August 2023. Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics here. Great to have you on, and as normal in our shows, we're going to have a interesting and wide-ranging conversation. Just before I bring Tony in, let me just remind you, as I always do, that we don't provide specific financial or legal advice. This is just a general conversation. We do moderate the chat, but feel free to add your comments and questions as we go through. This is, as I said, as at the 29th of August, if you're watching in replay. If you would like to get my attention and ask a specific question, use @WalkTheWorld, because that'll then move it into my queue, so I then see your question. I do encourage you to continue in the chat, but I won't necessarily follow all of the streams. But if you want to ask a question, use @WalkTheWorld. And I've also enabled Super Chat, which means you can get your question to the top of the list, or indeed make a contribution to what we do here, which is always greatly appreciated. Anyway, let me bring Tony in. Tony Locantro, hello.
Hey Martin, and a big hello to the audience. I was watching the chat earlier, and Alison, I will have an update on my health kick, and plenty of sarcasm for George Kaiser. Always like George in the chat, and Cookie the Andre Roux with the chat section. He's the orchestra, and he composes and does everything. So looking forward to a great show. And I'm coming to you live from Crown Barangaroo. I'm here for a gold conference, so no fish tank in the back, but ready to go. We've got the lighting right, ready to go.
Terrific, and you're looking good. And I have to say that comparing, your visage now with a few years ago, you've slimmed down. You're looking ultra fit. It's great.
Yeah, I'm going to provide some controversial secrets towards the end of my slideshow. So I expect the shit to be bagged out of me in the comments. Zero fucks given, everyone. It works for me. Oh, sorry. But it works for me. So anyway, we'll get there, Martin.
Excellent. Well, what we're going to do is, you've put some slides together, so what we're going to do is we're going to walk into those slides first, and I'll let you take control of the show, and then we'll get some questions and discussion going a little bit later. So if I do this, you should be ready to go.
Righty, let's do it. So I've titled tonight's talk "Welcome to the Shit Show," and I know it's been quite delayed, but I think it's Axl Rose is known for showing up hours late at a concert or not showing up at all, and I think that we're pretty much in it now, and it's just been a delay. Just because it hasn't happened straight away doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And anyway, that's the point of the call. I mean, Axel's there in his Y fronts. So now this is very important, everyone. This isn't personal advice. It's to be considered general advice, if anything. All I can do here is tell the truth, and the information's very, very current. Obviously, what I'm about to say is highly speculative. I mean, life's a risk now. So that's the disclaimer, which covers my backside. So this has been me probably the last coming up to 2 years. It's been, I've had probably the worst 2 years of my career. I've been advising in small cap stocks for 25, and it's just been an absolute shocker. And as you can see, I'm a fan there of Martin. But I mean, that bear looks probably a bit too happy. So one of my clients created that through artificial intelligence, and that's what it's been like. And unfortunately, we are due for a bear market in a number of other asset classes, and that's going to extend to crypto. It's going to extend to property. And I've been through 2 years of it, and I'm certainly getting to the point where this sandpaper is going to wear me down. But bear markets are usual, normal. They clean out the excess. But look, if you look at the long-term chart of property price growth in Sydney, it's about 2% on a real basis, and it's been growing at 5%. And I just shudder to think what happens when sentiment gets sucked out of the market. And we just can't have that on our most highly leveraged and emotional asset. So that's been me for the last couple of years. It hasn't been much fun. Now, this is what the top of the market looks like. It's when you're excited about a sector, you're thinking, geez, which one do I choose? Do I choose the one that is intelligent, can cook, and isn't going to take 80% of your money? I think that's the key. And I think this slide is also relevant to those looking at small cap stocks now. We've had 2 years of being absolutely poleaxed, and now we're at the point where, are we almost at the bottom? I just think a number of these stocks can't get any cheaper. There's always the chance for another leg down. And I look at this slide also. If you're around the Northern Beaches in late 80s, early 90s, would you go buy a house in Harbord or Curl or DY, which were pretty rough areas then? Even Bondi, where I was a cop, was a rough area. As you know, I could live in Bondi. I could walk 400 metres to the police station. I could go down to the beach just with a towel and surf at Bondi. Bondi was a much nicer place then because they didn't have a chemist warehouse. So anyway, that's what the bottom of the market looks like. Apologies to any females. Anyone attracted to money, there you go. There's money on the left. And I always, at Locantro.inc, I'm inclusive of male, female. So there's some male strippers. I believe that's Magic Mike. So that's what the top of the market looks like, or the bottom of the market. Now, thanks to Parapower, I should thank you on Twitter. Yes, I've completely ripped you off. Now, look at that beautiful house in Toongabbie, probably within close proximity to a meth lab. That sold for $1.22 million. I mean, seriously, WTF, guys. What planet are speculators on in friggin' Toongabbie? I just don't get it. Because when I was a police officer, I obviously didn't want to go to Summer Bay because that's the most dangerous police station in the world. I ended up at Bondi. Then what they did, they progressively transferred me out west, did the Bankstown area, worked around a lot of these rough areas. Would I live there? Hell no. I mean, it's cloudy with a chance of meatballs or a chance of a drive-by. But that just shows you what utter rubbish this market has become, and that's not healthy at all. And it gets even better, thanks Parapower again. Passed in at 1.46 million in Campsie. Now, unbelievable. Look at that beautiful home. You could buy an outstanding Federation home in Mount Lawley or Mount Hawthorn in Perth, which are arguably the best suburbs in Perth, where you don't have gang violence, drive-by shootings, etc., etc. Now, why they didn't take 1.46 million is beyond me, and I just don't get it. And they're the only two slides I need to just show how out of kilter we are. And I'll go back to Perth. I mean, you could sell that shitbox in Campsie, and you could buy 3 houses in Perth, 12 Ks from everything. And I know we don't have the Harbour Bridge. I know we don't have congestion. We don't have Parramatta Road. We don't have light rail. But that's just ridiculous. And I think these pictures are going to show exactly how crazy it is. And I only needed those 2 slides for that. Now, I look at, there was an ABC program on the rental market, and what an absolute disaster. I knew in Perth I needed somewhere to live. I had a massive dog. I had a child part-time, and I was competing with 30, 40 people. The vacancy rate in Perth got down to about 0.6, 0.7. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And I think what the ABC reiterated was that 30% of us actually rent. So we're all prone to rent increases, inspections. Those competing really can't have animals. They can't have children. It's pretty much a market for the landlord at the moment. I know there's stories in Perth where people are piling up in camper vans, living in cars, And I just think that as per your figures, Martin, on mortgage stress and rental stress is just a massive problem. And this is global now. An absolute shit show where the basic requirement for a roof over your head, the rate of rental inflation has just absolutely flown past wage growth. It's ridiculous now. Absolutely ridiculous. And it's such a sad state for Australia and the rest of the world. So obviously, rental stress over 30%. These figures are from a few years ago, so it's going to be a lot more. And you've got to look at low-income households that spend more than 30% on their rent. You've got some, no doubt, that still smoke, play the pokies, drink Maxwell House coffee, etc., etc. So, I mean, you've got that part of society as well that's got addictions and issues. That's where you're going to end up with crime as well. So they've got rental issues also. So, I'm being observational here from my experience, but I know that a lot of suburbs, you're paying thousands of dollars a week. I saw Alison in the chat mention a one-bedroom unit in South Brisbane for $640. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. You should be able to at least afford a three-bedroom family home for that amount. And it just shows that how high the stupidity has gone in this country. And the ABC actually focused on other cities around the world, and you should see what you get in New York or Japan. So, it's terrible. So they're the average rentals for units. Again, you've got to look at those prices, and you look at average wages. I mean, that's for a unit. So you can say, well, if the average wage is $90,000, I mean, obviously it's going to be a lot lower than that. And now, obviously, Adelaide is the cheapest capital city to rent. I still think Perth's quite reasonable, but you look at that gap there from Sydney. So that's a massive gap. And I think that's still going to exacerbate the crisis we're in at the moment. I think it's just only going to get worse, guys. So yeah, we're still hearing about these miracles, about how I flipped burgers and I bought myself 4 properties. And I think news.com.au or the Daily Mail are going to keep running these stories. I think it's all to keep the narrative going that you can work at McDonald's and you can own lots of properties. And then suddenly, guys, wham, it's over. I mean, I was dealing with people that ended up with 15 properties, 16 properties, and this is early 2000s, and it all turns to shit because it's just leverage. It's a Ponzi scheme. And I know one couple won, I think it was Money Magazine's Investor of the Year. I think it would have been about 2012 from memory, in a mining town in Queensland, and they ended up going bankrupt. So all these miracles on property ownership, you just Ponzi, revalue. You know how the story goes. And these media organisations aren't going to run stories on people that build share portfolios. I don't know why you have to go on and boast that you're in a shitload of debt. I just think it's ridiculous. And obviously they're gilding the lily on how they got the money in the first place. But anyway, Wham documentary is worth watching for anyone. So Nick Gurley is a guy on Twitter I follow out of the US. And if you have a look at that collapse in mortgage applications in the US, that is frightening. Now, Nick had some great videos. He has some great information. I remember when Morgan Kelly was up against Jim Power. So that if you haven't watched that, check it out on YouTube. Morgan Kelly was saying that a place like Arizona in the States was pretty much at the forefront of the house price collapse in America. And he explained the reasons why Ireland house prices would halve. Jim Power argued, saying that it's a new paradigm, the Irish economy's strong, we've got people coming in, yada, yada, yada. And then that just, as you know, turned to shit. House prices in Ireland did halve, and I'm pretty reasonably confident that could eventually happen here, but that looks horrific in the US. I know a lot of us follow the Canadian market, which has had some wonderful collapses in prices. Yeah, just massive carnage across. I know they're trying to stop ownership. They're trying to just curtail it. But I just think that sign in the US is very telling, and we shouldn't ignore it. And the debt to income ratio in the US is at the same level as 2006. And we all know what happened after that. So the US is in a heap of shit as well. I know we tend to ignore this, but a lot of the house prices in the US, they're 4 or 5 times income. But again, you've got the risk of gun violence and what comes of that. So this is the opioid pandemic that's spreading across the US. It's getting out of control. There's thousands of deaths per week. And this is an absolute disaster of epic proportions. And if it spreads here, heaven help us. These people are pretty much asleep. They're hunched over. You look at photos and videos of places, even like LA now, where gangs just go into sports stores and just walk out with clothes, or the streets of San Francisco. San Francisco has turned into an absolute dumpster pile. So we're already seeing society decaying like a junkie's teeth, and it's only going to get worse. And I know from my police experience, early 90s in Bondi, I was only dealing with pissed Maoris or other people from other countries, but we didn't have that massive meth problem that the world is facing now. And I think once people start to lose hope, they're going to turn to drugs. They're going to try and get that high. And I tell you what, a drunk Maori with a police baton was easy to contain, but good luck controlling this, because there's going to be even more anarchy in the US. And we all know the US is the greatest country on earth. So watch out. Hopefully this doesn't come to a shopping centre near you. But it's scary shit, guys. So yes, we're being sandpapered to death. For the ultra-rich, maybe not. They can still buy private jets. They can still live the lifestyle. Andrew Forrest just had a big party in the Pilbara. He hired Jimmy Barnes. I mean, I'd love to have hired Jimmy Barnes for my 50th, but no ticky, no laundry. Rumour has it Twiggy wanted to pay Coldplay $10 million. So anyway, good money if you can get it. But I just think now that it's not only Australia, it's New Zealand, it's Canada. It's pretty much global now as to what's transpiring. And I saw a presentation from the Payne Report at this gold conference, and he made an interesting point that he was saying that Vietnam is the place to go. That's going to suck in a lot of the investment dollars, and he thinks that Vietnam is going to be the phoenix. Vietnam, Indonesia to a certain extent, but you've got to be careful of corruption there as well. There's a lot of issues, with mining. But I found that interesting. And I think, Vietnam could be somewhere to follow. They're actually opening up direct flights from Perth. Might be worth a trip and have a look what's happening there. So anyway, guys, if you take anything away, Vietnam's the next place to be. Now, this is absolutely horrifying. I watch, when I'm bored with my son, I watch dash cam owners. Now, this is from Brisbane. Now, this person has run out deliberately in front of a car, it is believed, for insurance fraud. Why wouldn't you just torch your Audi or push it into a garage, report it stolen, and push it back out, as to what some people do? I guess arson's a bit hard now, but holy shit, that person has run out in front of what looks like a Land Cruiser for insurance fraud. And I think once we get more desperate, we're going to see an increase in crime. Channel 9 in Perth ran a story where a number of people have already turned to crime to pay the mortgage. And this is only going to get worse in Australia. I certainly wouldn't run in front of a car. I mean, I'd rather, look, first thing, I'd sign up to OnlyFans before I run in front of a Land Cruiser. Now, shoplifting. Going to be a huge problem here. You're going to see people in hoodies push a trolley into the meat section, walk away, run away with all the ribeye, Scotch fillet, and they're going to on-sell it. So Woolworths are saying, look, people are stealing stuff that they can resell. I know now razors and eye fillet meat is security protected. And that 20% increase in shoplifting that, as I said, Coles reported, that's frightening. I think it's only going to get worse. And I think you'll see shoplifters in Australia get more brazen. They might adopt the US model to some extent. So now we've got that degree of anarchy and stupidity to look forward to. But again, you look at the cost of groceries these days and, yeah, what inflation. Now, this is horrifying. One of the scenes from The Big Short is when they were dancing and Brad Pitt said that for every 40,000 people die for every 1% increase in unemployment. So if you apply that to Australia, that we're looking at roughly 4,000 people. We don't know how much truth is that. There has been some research done on it, but that's truly frightening. And I guess at the moment, people are hanging on for grim death to a lot of their jobs. We've got AI that's stealing authors' books now. We've got a lot of the jobs that Australians don't want to do are already taken. Let's be honest. People don't want to get in and work the horrific hours. All those jobs are taken. You're going to start to see restaurants closing. That's going to be global. And we're staying right on Barangaroo at the moment. We walked down on Sunday night. Those restaurants were dead. It was a ghost town. And I think it's going to look like a bit. I was in Dublin in 2010. Places closing everywhere. I think we haven't seen the worst of it yet in Sydney or anywhere for that matter. Because once we no longer feel wealthy, why would we go out and spend $150 on a meal? Plus, you've got to have drinks when you can go steal 2 ribeyes from Woolworths. So anyway, I just think that's horrific. And this is certainly going to hit home with the mental issues and suicide, domestic violence, etc. So good luck with even getting mental health support at all. Try and make an appointment with a psychologist. You might be waiting 6 months. And I've heard stories where you wait 6 months for a 15-minute appointment. And these guys are just going to be issuing antidepressants the whole time. And I just think that mental health issue is just going to escalate. And look, a lot of it mightn't be clinical. A lot of it might be situational, where the male normally, who's the provider for the family, is going to be under immense pressure. And that throbbing pressure of not being able to pay the bills, not having anything to look forward to, it's like a background headache. And I just think we're going to see an escalation in domestic violence. We're going to see guys lose their temper. I think we're going to see abuse of families, because I know the figures suggest that, as some famous self-appointed economists would say, that she'll be right, mate, house prices are on the way up. There's no mortgage cliff. What a load of shit. Families now are facing the mortgage cliff. They're going through their buffer like the dodgy Vindaloo. That's how fast the buffer's going through them. And suddenly they're going to run out of money. And what the hell do they do? Do they sell stuff? Too late. The best time to sell an Audi Q5 or a jet ski was 6 months ago. That window has closed. So I'm sick of all this shit where people say everything's all right, the mortgage cliff. It's not true, because these overpaid people in top positions probably haven't suffered too much financial stress. And I think that, on Are You OK Day on the 14th of September, I think people have to have a serious conversation. And you look at the mental health crisis with youth at the moment, it's just off the charts. And I know from my situation, I've been a police officer, steady pay. But I know once your income starts to dry up, you simply don't spend. You will not spend. You don't feel like going out to JB Hi-Fi or the Good Guys or your Mazda dealership because you like that new CX-90. You don't spend. And the last thing you're going to do is buy takeaway coffees. Buzz have already reported a massive decline, even though people are buying the beans. You're not going to spend. Why would you spend? Anything decent that goes into an op shop, it gets snapped up. I know I've taken a shit ton of Charles DeWitt shirts to the local Red Cross and they wouldn't last 5 minutes. So mental health, a huge issue. Ignore the cheerleaders, guys. Now, this was a billboard at Osborne Park in Perth. Not too far. I live somewhere close to there. So I drove past this billboard quite a bit of the time. And seriously, and she created a furor. I don't think she's that hot, to be honest. But that's what people do. And that's the attention-seeking dopamine generation. And apparently she's making $100,000 a month and then gets added publicity. I was reading Pearly Things. Pearly Things is an outspoken YouTuber in the US. And she was saying 4% of women are on OnlyFans. I mean, what, in the old days, you'd get a job at Domino's delivering pizzas or you'd get a cleaning job. Now women are selling their dignity to simps, men who would sit there in a basement and pull the wings off flies. But that's to the extent now where this generation are so desperate to survive that they have to put up billboards like that. Anyway, thank God it's been taken down. Garage sales. I mean, people sit there for hours. It's like when you go to a stall and you take your homemade candles and you sell one. Again, garage sales, best time to have a garage sale was 2 years ago. Game over. Good luck selling your treadmill, your chest freezer, or the thing. One of the most common things you see at curbside pickups is a pedestal fan. Anyway, but garage sales, forget it. A lot of stuff you go buy at boutiques now worthless. There's no market for it. I mean, maybe look at that iron. Even the iron's filthy. So this is a sad story in Perth. A young man has been a cryptocurrency trader, has been accused of killing his mum. I mean, that's the ultimate. Sadly, it could be financial. We don't know. He hasn't been proven guilty yet, but I mean, that's the lifestyle. I mean, how sad's that when we don't know the motive, that when people are forced to perhaps look at sinister ways, of getting money. I'm only not really predicting what's happened, but again, I think it's going to get to the point of desperation where some in households are just going to wish their parents were dead, to be honest, because that's the only way they're going to get out of the shit. It's like, well, give me my inheritance now, and that's all they want. And that's, I think, to an extent, that's what could save a lot of people. And it's a sad state of affairs when you have to wish ill harm on loved ones. So sad. I mean, I visit my mum in a dementia ward, and I'll tell you what, that's a bloody sad place. So, as Eminem said, if you only had one shot, where would you go? So we know a lot of sectors of the market are toast. I think obviously the major cryptos, people will trade them. Those following Richard Hart, Hex, and all that other shit. He put out, there has been a movie released about him, which is in the US. Might be worth catching up. There's also a movie coming out, Dumb Money, which is on GameStop. So that's going to be released soon as well. So it might be a bit of value there. But what I've decided is, since property, a lot of other asset classes are done, I don't like my chances of stripping on OnlyFans. So I'm backing silver, guys. I'm backing silver. I think the case, being at this gold conference, the case for gold, what has been put, is actually compelling. But there is risk with gold because the Australian dollar has taken a beating, and the gold price in Australian dollars is about 2,940. It was up around $3,000. So we were almost at an all-time high, yet the sentiment for gold stocks is in the toilet. So we've got the gap between production costs and profit now is as wide as Sydney Heads. And I think there's a chance that some of these gold producers, if they don't start taking over smaller companies, are actually going to start paying dividends. And I know many wouldn't expect dividends in that sector, but I think it's coming. And interestingly, so that's what happened. Obviously, we had the bunker Hunt, the Hunt brothers, who tried to corner the silver market in 1980. And we look what happened there before they tried to buy all the silver and force the price up, which they did. But then the government screwed them over. And on my dad's deathbed, he actually told me a story about how Nelson Bunker Hunt owned hundreds of racehorses, and he'd visit. My grandfather trained horses and bred horses, and Nelson Bunker Hunt would visit the farm, and Dad would talk to him, and he became quite the speculator. And he actually sold, I actually found out the figure, he had to sell 546 horses because he was absolutely trashed on the silver price. And I look now that I see the most upside in silver based on it's poor man's gold, it's being used in solar panels, and a lot of the world's biggest silver mines are in fact lead and zinc mines. So I remember the day I was working as a broker, and I was scared because Warren Buffett was selling all his silver at about $4.50 an ounce because he was worried about digital photography. He was worried that Kodak would go down the shit chute and the uses of silver would be reduced. So yeah, Warren probably sold towards the bottom. But that's my M&M. That's my big shot. And I don't have a DeLorean to go back to 1989 and buy 3 houses in Curl because then it was a shit suburb. Good surf though. So that's the 5-year silver price. It's done sweet bugger all. Obviously that's in US dollars. In Australian dollars, it's around $37. The way, even though the Perth Mint cops a lot of flack, you can actually go and buy kilo silver bars, which close to spot price. Remember, guys, this isn't personal advice, but when you buy a coin, you probably pay $44 to $45 a coin. So you can pay up to an $8 premium. But as we saw at this gold conference, the rare coin market has gone absolutely parabolic. So what I've done is the last couple of years, I've been poleaxed. I've had setbacks, mainly in my biotechs, which hopefully they'll come good, but it's just been a hideous market. And what I've done is I've got some stocks I call the red-headed stepchildren with freckles. They're the really bad ones. But I'm happy that we can accumulate lower. But what I've now worked out is that red metal and Maronan are my favourite mining stocks. So the reason why I'm suggesting this is because that's the short history. But this company has been around 20 years as a listed company. It's never let me down. It's had some massive spikes. And they own 50% of Maronan, which, according to a mad geologist in the US, they're drilling into what could be a boutique Cannington. This is a forward-looking statement. Cannington supplies 6%, it produces 6% of the world's silver, and he called it a rat tortilla. So Maronan, we're looking for a deep silver deposit. It looks as though they've got it close to surface, and it's beautiful, it's continuous. And my theory is that if the silver price has a run, we've probably only got about 10 silver companies on the ASX at the moment. If silver goes spastic, we will have 400 silver companies. I remember going back to 2008. I was involved in a lithium bubble then. There were two lithium stocks, Orocobre and Galaxy. So you could pick. Luckily, I went with Orocobre, but now we're in 2023. Lithium has had a couple of cracks. It crashed in 2018 in January. It's rebuilt. Hundreds of ASX companies have gone to James Bay, Canada, any other exotic location. And unfortunately, the last few weeks, looks as though a lot of lithium speculators are suffering, probably to the same amount that I've suffered in junior gold stocks and biotech, because some of the major crowded stocks now are stumbling. And again, you just don't want to be in a bear market. And I'm just absolutely petrified that spreads to property. I think it will. So red metal, that's going to be one of my big suggestions. Maronan, they have the Maronan deposit. It's lead, silver, copper, gold, maybe something down below. So I just think that if silver does what I think it could do, they will get priced accordingly. There's 100 million ounces of silver at the Maronan deposit, remembering that red metal own half of that company. So I'm looking forward. I'm thinking, well, what's going to go next? We've had, lithium. We've had rare earths. Obviously, crypto's had a few cracks. A lot of the shit coins have turned to effluent. But where else is the speculative money going to go? We've seen a massive run in AI. Guys, AI's held up the US indices. The US indices are so skewed towards tech stocks. That's why the Dow has danced sideways like the Bolshoi ballet. I think the markets are certainly skewed. But look, I'm looking towards a company that has an emerging deposit in a hot area, which is a chance of a takeover target. So they're the two stocks that, whilst I wait for my redheaded stepchildren with freckles to behave, that's where I'm going. And now I've got one more. Now this is a punt from hell. This only suits those that like playing blackjack with perfect pairs, though the real rank punters amongst us. Now, I met with this company. I was halfway through the meeting, and then I got that text that my car had been towed from a clearway. And I was like, holy hell. So, so I had to walk to the tow yard and pick up my car. Luckily, they laughed at me and let me off without any financial penalty. But I met with Conrad Todd from Triangle Energy. I run some client Zooms where I interview 5 companies. And on the last one, I interviewed Conrad. Barry Fitzgerald is one of the best resource stock journalists in the business. And he said that's a great story. It's 2 cents. There's the chart. Pretty ugly chart. But what I like about this stock is they're producing oil. They're going to sell their producing operation. They've got $10 million in the bank. They own $4 million worth of state gas, and they're selling their production operation for up to $15 million. So the value is covered. They have $20 million of expenditure coming in 3 high-impact wells next year in the Perth Basin. Now, the Perth Basin, for those that don't know, was an area of Perth where Gina Rinehart paid $450 million to take over a company, and MinRes paid about $400 million as well. It's hot property. So there are 3 wells. The company's covered. Look, the odds, it's a punt. It's a punt, but I'm backing the management to try and build a decent oil and gas company. But if one of these wells comes in, and the good thing about oil stocks, oil stocks are probably, honestly, they're as tough as diamonds or biotech. But you can often buy a stock around here, and when the oil well spuds, which means when they commence drilling, you can probably de-risk yourself and sell at a profit. So that's the trend we're dealing with oil stocks. But I just think that this look, sometimes when we're in desperate times, instead of going defensive, I come out swinging, and that's what I'm doing at the moment, because sometimes the best defense is offense. And we all look back and say, oh, geez, I wish I bought all these properties. I wish I bought that. I wish I bought Bitcoin at 20 cents. I wish I did that. And these stories of I wish keep you going. Well, they're not going to put your kids through private schools and pay your Scotch fillet. So anyway, that's what we're doing. That's do your own research. But anyway, so what I've been doing, I know Alison asked about my health kick. So 2023 has been a year of transformation for me. When I graduated from police academy, I was fit. The problem with the police is that when I was in Bondi, every restaurant brought over their leftovers. And I just developed, we'd sit there, we'd drive around in a police car, and, and years as a financial advisor, it has been stressful. So I hit the gym 5 days a week. I actually do weights, which used to scare the hell out of me. I've gone onto the carnivore diet. I've done the research. It works. So I was in the gym. I'd reached a plateau. I've turned to this diet. 10 kilos have just disappeared like a burp in the wind. So anyway, I'm doing another charity run to the Red Cross with all my imported English shirts. Do the research. So what it means is you eliminate all carbs, all shit, all sugar, rice, pasta, bread. You eliminate it. You eat animal stuff only. Then you can add whatever you like. You can treat this as strict or as non-strict as you like. I used to go to Woolworths. Cadbury would be half price. I'd buy 10 blocks. I'd eat one block. I'd have half of the other one. I was addicted to dumplings. Don't get me started on KFC. So that's what I'm doing. And bye-bye 10 kilos. Pretty soon I'll be at my police academy fitness and weight. Anyway, maybe I could be a stripper on OnlyFans. Anyway, it's controversial. I don't care. It works. I'm taking a year off alcohol. This has been the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm not tempted. At the conference drinks, we just ask for sparkling mineral water. When I go out with my friends, I carry a magnesium supplement, which is like a Barocca. I mean, that just adds some colour to my water. I've said that on the 28th of February next year, I'm flying to Hungary. By the way, Martin, on that trip, I'll come to Bath. I don't even think I'll take up drinking then. I'm over it. And I used to turn to the bottle. You just don't feel good. Now on a Saturday morning, I seize my Saturday. I'm up at 5:30. I'm in the gym, buy the newspapers, get onto Twitter, laugh at all Cookie Boys tweets. But alcohol, bye-bye. Put it this way, it cuts down on fine dining bills, let me tell you. Oh, paddle. I love this sport. I cannot recommend this sport highly enough. So it's 90% tennis, 10% squash. So the ball can bounce off the glass, and then you can hit it off the glass. You can hit it forward into the glass. It can bounce over the net. I'm playing it. I absolutely love it. I do. I have got into tennis a bit, but this is next level. So I'm addicted to this. It's big globally, not as big in Australia, but that's all part of my regime. And I'm not bad for a 52-year-old. So anyway, I love it. So this is what I'm doing. And on the right, our dog Diego sadly passed away, and we were sitting down over a coffee a couple of weeks ago, and Juliana said to me, look, I'd like another dog. Okay, so we went to the dog rescue home. We were going to get a terrier, small dog. So I tried out a few dogs, and Achilles, who's an Akita, we got on straight away, and I said, I'm adopting him on the spot. So that's my new buddy, and he's beautiful. We've been watching Colin from Accounts on Binge. So we've changed his name from Achilles to Colin. He actually answers to it. And I've had high blood pressure for years, and I think animals are good. And the carnivore diet, I mean, a little bit of work to do on my pulse, but that's the best blood pressure reading I've ever had, and it looks pretty normal to me. And that's 8 weeks of intense, but I'm never going back, because I know that in this environment where we're heading, I've got to be mentally fit. I've got to be physically fit, because I just think life's going to become a struggle. And I really worry about families that are so far down that when you're looking at ways, how can we save our house? How can we save our cars? How can we keep our kids in schools? You do, no doubt, they're going to feel anxiety. And once you get anxiety, it's hard to make any forward decisions. So I just thought, well, stuff it. I'm not getting any younger. And so 2023, look, financially it's probably been the shittiest year in many, but stuff it. I'm going to get this thing done. And I think this is a good slide. I use this often. When things are going well, you've got the campfire on the left. Everyone's singing Ed Sheeran songs. But when the crowd starts to turn on itself, when asset prices start to drop, you have riots. And I think we're going to see this. Obviously they riot a bit differently in the US and some European countries, but you're going to start to see some social unrest here in Australia. And I think it's going to shock many, because we've had this easy run. We've had interest rates at 0.1. Now suddenly they're 4.1 with a chance of going higher. People are going to start to lose assets. They're going to start to lose their lifestyles. They're not going to be able to pay their bills. You're going to start having families dishonor on their Netflix, and the secondhand market's going to be flooded. Second jobs, forget it. Because as I said, we're going to have immigration, and people that want to do the shit jobs have already got them. They're going to apply for them. They're going to go out and work. They don't realise that they're not making much money, but they want to live the Australian dream. They want to work. So I just think we're in for tough times. I know that public servants, police, fireys, nurses all want more money, because they cannot live anywhere near an area where they work, and that's a major concern. Because I go back to the recession we had to have. When I joined the police, I could live pretty much anywhere in Sydney I wanted to. Now, it's just, $1.3 million for a house? Turn it up, guys. I'd rather live in Perth, where the capital decline is going to be less. And I've suggested that at some point the switch was on. Sell Sydney, buy 3 in Perth. And what people can't do is eliminate toxic people from their diet. If you don't get on with your family, stuff them, move. Who cares? That's what you do. Life's too short. I've learnt over my life that I've put up with toxic people for too long. Sometimes you make the move. What would you rather? Bankruptcy or freedom? Anyway, it's your choice, guys. Anyway, that's the way I see it. Sorry, I can't be more bullish. Bada bing, bada boom. That's it.
Tony, what can I say? A couple of people in the chat were saying I've never been so quiet for so long, but I didn't need to say anything because you were on your long run. And I think the points that you've made are absolutely critical for people to get their head around. In fact, somebody in this chat earlier on said, why aren't we getting this sort of, story in the mainstream? Because the mainstream is really, not understanding where we are. And I guess, if I unpack some of the things that you said, I think one of the things we should think about a little bit is where the old Aussie is, right? The exchange rate's dropped. And to me, that's a very important leading indicator because it tells you something. Now, some of that's because of the strength of the US dollar, but the US dollar was as strong a year ago. And what I might do is I'll just put the slide up. This is actually the current Aussie dollar, right? And we're at 64 at the moment. What's your take on this? And is this a vote of no confidence in what's going on in Australia and maybe the political atmosphere here and the economic atmosphere, or is it temporary, or is this something that is actually significant? How are you reading it?
I I see it as a major issue short to medium term. I think we certainly can go lower. That's for sure. I know some self-appointed godlike economists are saying 75. Well, good luck with that. But I think we're in for some more pain, Martin. And what I have been saying for a little while is that we could turn into the mother of all safe havens. And I think that money and strength in our economy could come once we have that reset. And you've seen bubbles like in Scandinavian bubbles, the bubble in Japan, Ireland, New Zealand, Canada have had their own. So I think at some point, once we have this great reset where all the speculative money is washed out, when families default on their homes, when banks start buying up homes a la Ireland, I think Australia could actually forge ahead out of this. But I see more downside in our dollar. I think we're in a bit of a shambles because we're the great economy that relies on iron ore, and we rely on flipping houses to speculators. We rely on the price of houses in Toongabbie going up at 20% per annum. We rely on Jimmy Barnes playing at Fortescue's 20-year celebration. So we're built on jack shit. Where's our manufacturing? Where's our real strength in this economy? Because Australians are speculators. And I mean, America's turning into zombie land with all those opioid addictions. That hasn't hit here yet. So I see some more downside. But is Mr. Payne right in saying that Vietnam and Indonesia are going to be the growth, with maybe to a lesser extent India? But I wouldn't bet against Australia. Obviously, house prices, eastern states need to drop 30 to 40%. I think that will happen naturally. I don't think any government can save it. Once the panic's on, it's over. And in leading up to the GFC, the call was that the super fund inflows would save the All Ords in the ASX 200. The All Ords in the ASX 200 halved, and brokers were offered trips to Hawaii to put people in margin lending. It's the same with mortgages. So I see further weakness in the Australian dollar. Maybe it dances sideways for a bit, but where is the next real growth area going to come? Is it Vietnam? Is it India? India's been a bigger gunner than Navarone on economic growth. You look at Brazil. Brazil was on the front of the Economist saying this is the next boom area. Well, it hasn't happened yet. So I think all this money's got to go somewhere. Could it come? Well, East Coast has to get cheaper. Adelaide house prices went up 30%, even in suburbs such as Elizabeth. Speculative money found Hobart. Who knows? We could have an almighty bubble in Perth, a la 2006. So, look, I know I've bit of a long-winded answer, but I still think there's downward pressure on the Aussie dollar. But who knows what's going to happen then, because we're in crazy times. And who would have thought on the bingo card interest rates at 0.1 or a global pandemic where we were locked up? So, yeah, I'm bearish short term, but I think once everything collapses and prices start to normalise, we could become great again.
Right. And of course, in the short term, with a lower exchange rate, we are effectively importing further inflation. Yep. Right. And if we import further inflation, then that's going to put more pressure on the Reserve Bank, which is probably going to have to lift rates. And, the mantra coming out from Jackson Hole last week was rates will be higher for longer. The Eurozone is saying the same thing. And to my mind, I'm not sure that the RBA can completely disconnect its decisions from that global move, plus the inflationary pressures, plus, of course, the costs of energy. And energy prices have gone up a lot recently. I've noticed that a date's now been set for the gas strike in Western Australia, and there was a 10% lift in the futures price for LNG as a result. So, the energy story is probably going to be more inflationary than many thought. So to my mind, anybody who's thinking that we're at the end of this hiking cycle and that we're going to see rates drop and that interest rates are going to come back down are absolutely kidding themselves.
Well, I think Chris Joy, he mentions that just because you pause doesn't mean it's not going up. But this is a crazy situation. Now, for years, we've been watching these Chinese ghost towns. For years on 60 Minutes. Finally, guess what? It's a Ponzi. You look at Evergrande or whatever, down 87%. The Chinese property sector was the biggest Ponzi scheme that all these units, these cities built. It was a fugazi. Now it's being found out. Could that slow down the rising cycle of interest rates in Australia? Who knows? But if that's a Ponzi, look at the Toongabbie Greenacre housing market. Is that a bigger Ponzi than Beijing, Shanghai? You can't have it both ways. We either have an absolute shit show with Chinese property going to where it should be, and then our property market gets hit and we get some mild interest rate relief, or do we plough our way through it? Does the RBA increase another 25 basis points and see what happens? But it's over. It's over, guys. We're not seeing people go and overbid at Leichhardt for a one-bedroom unit without a parking bay. We're still going to see pockets of stupidity around, but that adrenaline, that dopamine stupidity, I think is over for now. And we've seen what happens to other asset classes once the fuel is removed, once you've got nothing to fuel it. And I go back to those charts from Nick Gurley in the US. Look at that collapse in mortgage applications. Look at what the debt to income ratio in the US, it's as bad as it was just before the GFC. So it's over. You can't have price to income ratios 13, 14 times when the long-term average is 4 to 5. It's going to revert to the norm. And in some cases, it's going to overshoot to the upside. Because as I mentioned with property, a real estate agent in Penrith sells a house for 200 grand less. He goes to someone else who wants to sell and says, look, this is all we can get. And then suddenly there's 15, 20% off that suburb. So I think the RBA, Eastern States, is in a very difficult situation. In Perth, we've got houses selling in 12, 13 days. Median price is about 560, which is 6.5 times income, which is probably based on how good our city is about right, Martin. So maybe we're fairly priced with a little bit of downside. So I think we're running definitely a two-speed economy, especially with mining, property, and Australia trying to develop an AI or biotechnology growth country. I just think, at some point, life's going to get back. It's just like music eventually reverting back to guitars, bass, and drums. We need a big clean out. And unfortunately, I think I read today that 1.5 million Australian families, or 29.2%, are about to face mortgage stress. Was that it, roughly?
So that's the Roy Morgan numbers, which they published earlier in the week, right? Now, they measure mortgage stress based on the sort of quasi-underwriting standards that the banks use, right? That's not the same as my definition of mortgage stress, so I'm looking at it in total cash flow terms. And in total cash flow terms, mine is even worse. So more than 60% of mortgage of renters, well over 60%, but close to 50% of mortgage holders now have a cash flow problem, right? So I'm even earlier in the sort of the lens that Roy Morgan uses, which in turn is earlier than the default rate, which is going up, by the way, but slowly. And that's despite all the banks doing double somersaults with Pike to try and help people, right? So extending the loan term, moving to interest only, allowing people to pull equity out to be able to actually cover the cost of the mortgage for a period of time. I mean, they're doing absolutely everything to try and keep the balloon in the air, but it's, a puff of, it's not just a puff of wind that's coming, right? The hurricane's coming, and my view is that we are going to see this now really grind through. Remember, we're only halfway through the mortgage cliff. There's another 40 to 50%, according to the CBA, in terms of what's happening. So I think there's a real issue. And this slide, I'll just put it up, is really telling, right? So this is the real dwelling price compared with the full average weekly earnings all the way back from 1970, right? And you can see there how the dwelling price has gone way, 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 way out of kilter, which is why I'm of the view, which is a bit what you said, that we know we're going to be in the situation potentially where we're going to find the difficulty here is that it's got to come back to norm. It's got to come back to norm in due course. And the question is only how quickly that will be, right? Now, everybody says, Tony, things like, well, high migration will save us, right? Yeah. But if you look at the intergenerational report which came out last week, what they're saying is that we're going to be a poorer nation, that we're going to be paying higher taxes, that housing is going to be less accessible. And so there's not much in the intergenerational report that says that high migration is going to save us. And what I'm interested in is some of the migration data is showing that people are coming in, they're going to the rental sector and they're getting into difficulty. I've seen that in my surveys. So to my mind, high migration isn't going to save us. It's going to create more of an issue rather than less of an issue. And so we're in the situation where the gale is coming. Yeah. And we're going to see more government intervention to try and sort of prop everything up. But the question is, we're out of ammo. You know, that the total debt that the government's got is massive. And now the interest rates are high, which means that the proportion of government spending that's going to have to be spent on interest is higher than it's been for a long, long time. So I don't see an exit strategy other than we're going to go through a very significant bumpy ride for quite a long period of time. And some people will lose their shirts.
Yeah, I think, and we haven't really discussed what happens when the investors start to sell. What happens when their capital gains start to erode? And for many, the fear of a capital loss is actually worse than the event itself. And I think you're starting to see that in Melbourne as well. Investors are starting to sell. They'll start to sell everywhere. This bullshit about affordable housing, they just look like trailers with an awning. I think they're up in Queensland, maybe Gympie. I saw them, green, beautiful, affordable housing. You've got all these mortgage prisons north of Perth, like Alkimos and areas like that. A lot of people are on key start and they're getting sandpapered to death. So there was an interesting slide put up about, I was on Twitter, I think it might have been Sam Trades, who showed the average price of the house in Beverly Hills, Sydney, and it was $17,000. This was in 1968. And he was saying that's equivalent to $286,000 now. I mean, I can imagine an entry-level house in Beverly Hills or Bexley would be your 1.2. So you've got to look at that going out of kilter. When I grew up in Manly Vale, my father bought a unit in Manly Vale near the golf course, beautiful area. He paid 3 times his earnings. I mean, that was the 70s. That's where the wife could stay at home and bake apple pies or do that, and there was less stress. And now 2 jobs, childcare, streaming service subscriptions, takeaway coffee, lunches with the girls. We've just become addicted to spending. And what I've realized after too long, doesn't matter what car you drive, it doesn't matter what house you're in, as long as it's good. If you're getting bored of your house, rip up the carpet and put in fake floorboards. It works wonders for me. But we're going to realise that all this spending, it was unnecessary, and people are going to have to start selling things they need because they bought things they wanted. And that's, Buffett said that. So I just think this rampant consumerism peaked when the buy now, pay later stocks absolutely tanked. You look at Domino's, Collins Food, these companies, the junk food companies, are starting to struggle. Retailers are starting to struggle. JB Hi-Fi has done well. They'll start to struggle. I mean, no one needs to spend. Who needs to go and buy a curved 3D TV, for Christ's sake? Who needs a 100-inch TV? We're going to start to use our TVs for longer. Guess what? You bought a car 3 years ago with a 7-year warranty, and the buggers at Kia are the best marketers in the business, and they want you to go buy that new Sportage in that, or the Seltos in that green colour. They're good at marketing. You don't need it. Stick with what you got. If you're bored with your car, just go and wash the bloody thing. Get it detailed. Pay $200 and fall in love with it again. So we've had it too easy for too long. COVID, I believe, health-wise and financially, is going to be the worst thing that's happened to this country, because pre-COVID, I mean, I lost $2,500 to Stephen Koukoulas. I was on track to win that bet. Then the biggest black swan, a big mother of a black swan, hit, and look what's happened. We've become dopamine addicted, binging, attention-seeking generation that's dumbing itself down. So you're going to have to get rid of all this, and it's going to take the mother of all corrections, and it's every family for themselves. That's how it is. You've got to take your family's balance sheet, protect it. If you need to go find a second job, do it. My mortgage cliff is in November 2026. I locked in 5 years. I've worked out by then my 23 years of child support are over. That's the price you pay for failed marriages, guys. But I'm going to be in a much better position. And I've taken it that my house in Perth will only increase moderately, but it's shelter. I can paint a wall. I can put a TV up. But I'm taking the view that instead of, if you've got the chance to take a bit of risk, now's the time to do it. And that goes completely against what we're told to do. But, and I think the thing I find funny, guys, is the hatred for boomers. They worked their ass off. They went through higher interest rates. What the hell have they done wrong? They've been given this magic carpet ride. They've all won lotto. They can cash it in. A lot of the stuff is tax-free. Their own homes tax-free. Wow, they can take it. In that society, some of the parents, grandparents would have come through wars. They would have had to fought for the country. They would have lived on minimal food, maybe a black and white TV if we're lucky. But we can't hate people that were afforded that economic situation. And the younger generation got to go and borrow at 1.99% interest, 2%, 1.992%, borrow, go get an $800,000 mortgage in East Dubbo and buy $1 million house. Well, sorry, it doesn't work like that, guys.
Absolutely. Well, things are certainly changing. Now, let me move the conversation forward a little bit, because you were talking about gold and silver. I do have the long-term gold story here. So this is the long-term chart, right? So basically, it peaked in 2011, got a little bit higher in 2021, and it's come back down again. But over the long term, of course, it hasn't performed particularly strongly, and it's interesting if I compare that with silver, which I've also got here. The silver was a big peak, as you showed, and then it sort of went down and sideways. But the rationale for gold or silver, and particularly silver, is quite interesting. It sounds to me you've got the view that silver is, and maybe gold too, is likely to go higher. What's the mechanism that will drive it higher relative to what's happened over the last decade?
Okay, so a lot of bubbles are built on a real situation, then they're driven by dreams. I've just mashed up a quote from George Soros, the other famous Hungarian apart from my wife. So my view is that it'll be FOMO driven. It'll be the fear of missing out. You've got lots of fund money waiting to go somewhere. And fund managers need to pay off their house in Mossman and their BMW. So they don't want to underperform. So I just think that we look at all the assets that have burst or are in the process of bursting. Unless we're going into another Cabbage Patch doll bubble, I think the money's going to go to hard assets. And I think the world is in enough shit that gold, silver, who knows, platinum might even get off the canvas. But once, and if you go onto Twitter, there's a thread called Silver Squeeze. Now that's very interesting. There was talk that the GameStop people were going to switch to silver. I think that silver could be easy manipulated, and once it gets on a tear, watch out. So my view is industrial, precious metals, FOMO driven, and we look at society today. In the old days, I used to walk to the stock exchange in Bond Street with the Financial Review in my back pocket and watch share prices. Now this information is disseminated on chat groups, Twitter. I just think that it's got the industrial upside, shortage, solar panels, antibacterial qualities, and to go. I'd rate uranium second. Uranium price has done quite well. But in 2005, 2006, I was involved with my client who we actually rescued Paladin from going into voluntary administration. Stock was 0.8%. Uranium bubble comes, it goes to $10.80. So uranium was a handful of companies in the hundreds. And I just think silver has the same potential to do, maybe not to the extent that lithium companies have done. All an Australian junior resource company would do would have to go and find some ground in James Bay, Canada, and the share price would go up 5,000 to 1,000%. I just think that potential exists with silver. I think that people are getting bored with lithium. I've got to look at a sector and place my bets, and that's what I'm placing it on, because it looks as though it wants to go higher, and there's a new band with the gold. I mean, gold is the four tops. I mean, it's had four tops. Surely at some point it's going to have a break. But the key is, guys, it's a currency play. And so if our dollar drops further, it's going to go even higher in Australian dollars. But then it becomes, I mean, you could buy gold and lose money on it. But what I'm trying to reiterate is that 300 ounces back in 1971 would have bought you a house in Campsie. Now 300 ounces of gold in 2023 will buy you a knockdown in Campsie. So gold over that period has maintained its purchasing power. It doesn't pay you dividends, but if you look back in history, in 1978, 1980, gold stocks went to the moon, and it's happened with lithium, uranium, scandium, vanadium, phosphate, potash, ammonium, kryptonite. All these commodities have bubbled. So, yeah, why not silver? And it's my companies have what could be a mine. Place your bets. That's it. So it's speculation, Martin.
That's fine. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Now, Cookie Boy asked a question a little while ago, which I think follows on from that quite nicely. He says, Tony, you love gold juniors, especially with the stuff in the ground. If there's a crash in the low Aussie dollar, will Aussie gold juniors become takeover targets? What's your thought on that?
Well, you know what will happen in the short term. They'll get sold off even more. But I've been walking around at this gold conference talking to companies about potential corporate activity, and I think it's going to escalate. And a major gold company needs to replenish production, and from discovery to putting a mine in production can be 10 years, or you can simply go and buy it. And we had a company present today that I came away from the Gold Coast conference. It was 11 cents. They're about 30 now. That are an absolute sitting duck for a takeover. And you can see it. The plant's there. The gold's there. They've had one of the best discoveries in WA in recent memory. In the previous life, they went broke. So there's tax losses. And it's just a matter of time. But unfortunately, there has to be consolidation. There are too many gold companies. Companies with 500,000 ounces need to get together. They need to build a plant and do that. But unfortunately, the gold industry, like any industry, is ego-driven, and always mine's bigger than yours. That's how it works. But yes, I can see M&A coming. Yeah. But you're going to have the best upside. I mean, Paladin, 0.8%. If you were in a coma or in jail and held your stock from 0.8% to $10.80, you'd be rich. But us humans always have to be on the sell button. So there's orphanages full of red-headed stepchildren with freckles, right? These are stocks that have been decimated, that have gold in the ground, and when the bubble comes, away they go. And, it's just like being, you don't know you're dead and you don't know you're stupid. People don't know they're in a bubble. But this is a new norm. It's a new paradigm. And when you're not in a bubble, it's impossible to predict the bubble. So I think the value in Australian gold stocks is outstanding. I went to a luncheon a few weeks ago where they showed the price of gold production against the Aussie dollar gold price, and it's widening. So these companies are going to spit cash. It's sometimes $1,600 an ounce. And if the Australian dollar gold price stays where it is, these gold producers can start paying dividends like the banks could. And it's money. You find gold, you build a plant, you add acid to it, you grind it, you bank it straight away. And that's probably the most liquid market on the planet. So I see huge amounts of M&A coming. I remember Bill Beeman used to drive into my broking office. Bill's stock, Northern Star, was 1 cent. I used to meet Bill at my client's house to raise money at 5 cents. He bought one mine and it becomes a sausage factory. So the one thing that this generation has missed out on is patience. People can't even wait 2 minutes for their 5-minute noodles to cook now. We want returns yesterday. So the world is going to get back to fundamentals, real investment, and investment, to be honest, can be quite boring, but there's no fever like gold fever, and wait till there's a big discovery or a takeover. So, and I think Cookie's absolutely right. It's going to increase because it's cheaper to buy ounces than to find them.
Yeah, interesting, of course, that Australia's gold held by the government is sitting in the vaults in England, which is an interesting observation. Tony, the other thing I wanted to pick up, you made the point about the US markets had been boosted very strongly by the AI stocks, the big seven, basically. And if you look carefully, the whole of the US market's performance over the last 12 months or so has predominantly been driven by that one thematic. Elsewhere, stocks have been much weaker. And if you go back to the start of the year, everyone in the US was expecting a recession. And then over the year, they kicked the recession forward. And then they started talking about the immaculate landing. And then they started talking about rises in interest rates, having to go a little higher. And then they talked again about, well, maybe there won't be a recession. And then we had Fed Chair Jerome Powell coming out and saying, no, rates will be higher for longer and we're going to still stick with our 2% target rather than the R squared, which is sort of this theoretical thing that doesn't really exist. But I guess the question I've got is, given what we've seen with regard to AI, is this really just another bubble? Or do you think there's actually something here? Because it seems to me it's got all the characteristics of the dot-com bubble and other bubbles we've seen, the housing bubble too. I'm less convinced than many that AI is really that sort of world-beating, earth-shattering change that some people are saying. What do you think?
Oh, it's just a Google search on steroids, isn't it? I've mentioned in the past, I wrote my partner a poem, AI. I put in a few things, and Juliana actually cried. So AI made her cry, and there was this author in WA interviewed a couple of weeks ago, and it stole his novel. It's just, you ask any question and it spits it out. I asked for a arm and leg machine workout, and it gave me a workout. So personal trainers are going to struggle now. I think you can have AI with trading systems, you can have stop losses, you can have long-term capital management. All these algorithms absolutely blow up. You want to blow the world up, get AI trading. I think we're going to get back to people need human interaction. They need to talk to other people. Otherwise, our mental health is going to go even more to shit. So yes, it's a bubble. I think the US indices have artificially been kept high. A lot of the stocks in the Russell, biotech, NASDAQ it's capitulated. It's gold stocks, mining stocks in the US, to a lesser extent oil stocks, small companies have been decimated. Disney's getting smashed. You've got to remember that the Dow Jones is 30 companies, and you've got the S&P 500, which I believe is actually 505 companies. So, and you've got to look at the NASDAQ, and I've been trading around the BBUS, which backs against the S&P 500. There are other ETFs, you can bet against the NASDAQ. But the BBUS has underperformed. It had a massive run. It paid a dividend. You could trade that around. But just because a correction hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And you look at what's happening in America, you look at what's happening around the world, higher interest rates for longer eventually bite, and the consumer, they're not going to want to spend as much as, you're not going to have that flow-on effect. And, people are just going to shoplift and do things like that. But I know I can see it now that we're going to stop spending. And you look at what happened in Japan. I mean, one property in Japan was worth more than the whole of Manhattan. And you look at those multiples in the bubble. Japan Airlines trading at 900 times PE ratio. The Japanese thought they were different, guys. They thought that they had different intestines and they were immune to speculation. Well, the average PE ratio on the Nikkei was 53 times, for Christ's sake. So you've got to look at it, we don't speculate. And you look at that bubble, and suddenly they've got an aging population. They've saved a lot they hoard their money, but now you've got elderly people committing crimes to go to prison so they can get looked after. So I don't think we'll end up like that. I think Australians, she'll be right, mate. We'll just have an Irish-style schmozzle. We'll watch all these new estates out east, Bathurst, East Dubbo. The key is watch for people that don't tend to their lawns. Watch cars. Cars will get dirty. No one's going to spend money washing their car. People aren't going to spend money servicing their car as well. So it's a long, drawn-out process.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Very interesting. And, I've had the view for some time that some of the AI stuff is exhibiting all of the bubble. Look at the PE ratios of NVIDIA. And it's worth interesting. There's a company called Sun Systems, which was around the time of the dot-com bubble, right? And I remember reading a book by the guy who basically was creating Sun Systems. And he said it got to the point, because of the size of the bubble, that they would have had to have actually doubled their revenue every year, cut their costs to zero, and basically not employed anybody, and the ratio would have been right. And they said, it was stupid, right? But at the time, everybody said, it's different this time. The rules of the world have changed. The rules of the road have changed. We can't use traditional valuation techniques to value these dot-com bubble companies. And now, in retrospect, you got to say, well, no, the fundamentals still exist. And in fact, whilst there's a lot of hot money flushing around the place because of all the quantitative easing and all of the fact that money's been created to billio, and it's got to go somewhere. So I agree there's a lot of hot money, but still the fundamentals are still there. And the fundamentals, if you look at the fundamentals of some of those AI stocks, are way, way over anything that makes any sense at all. So that's why I've had a view for some time that we are going to see those settle back down again. And if they do settle back down, that means the markets are overvalued dramatically, and that means that the overall exchanges will probably see a fall. I wouldn't be surprised to see that with rates rising. And I personally think that most of the analysts in the US are still fixated on the idea of a soft landing and the Fed will cut rates. And I just don't think it's necessarily going to be true. So as we come to the end of this show, Tony, I mean, to my mind, as I sort of stand back, I think it's about waking up and smelling the roses and basically just stripping back some of the BS and saying how things really are. And that's what I get from you when you come on, right? Which I think a lot of people in the chat have also appreciated that. And I guess, what's the one message that you want to leave us with tonight in terms of we are where we are, over the next few months, consumer confidence is through the toilet still, and it's not really going to recover anytime soon, as far as I can see, based on what Roy Morgan is saying. Consumer confidence means that retail is going to be under huge pressure. We're going to have more interest rate rises. We've got this migrationary bubble coming in at the moment, but that's probably not sufficient. And we've got a lack of housing supply, which is creating huge issues. So we've got this huge dynamic going on at the moment. So what's the one simple message you want to leave tonight?
I think, we're coming up to Are You OK Day, and I think our family's well-being is everything. I think you've got to stay mentally fit, exercise. I mean, go get your dopamine somewhere else rather than going to Westfield. That's what you have to do, and that's what it's all about. Go play sport. Go to the gym. I hated the gym up until 2 years ago. 1 year ago. Do it. Just get involved in something else. And probably the most important message is to sit down with your partner and say, are we okay? Because when it comes to money, we all stick our head in the sand. You just think these direct debits are going to be miraculously come out of your account. Well, one day it's going to bloody dishonour. And I think the reason why I can talk like this, Martin, is because I've gone through periods where my income is volatile and I've been fighting for my life financially. And I've had periods of lots of money, bugger all money. I've had to look at second jobs, writing books, teaching people, cutting back on my spending. I think the best thing you can do for your mental well-being, guys, is go through everything you've got in your house and just, when in doubt, chuck it out. And as they say, just keep things that spark joy. Donate. Get rid of your clutter. Go through your personal balance sheet. Look at your mortgage. Factor in another couple of percent. If you're heading for the mortgage cliff, adjust it. Look at your car loans, look at all your debts, and just be realistic with your partner and say, look, if you're in a bit of trouble, what do you do? And what is going to hurt many Australians is they're never going to get the break-even price on their property when you add stamp duty, and that means they're not going to sell until the bank forces them to. So my advice to people, we're in the shit show. Hopefully we don't see those zombies in the US come to Australia. I'm sure it will to some extent, but just sandbag your own finances and just exercise, give up all the shit. Remember, it's gambling, cocaine, porn, sugar. I've come clean. People saying, oh, geez, you sound like Hillsong or Scientology, Locantro, but no, this shit is real, guys. So defend your family. And if you hate your family, move away from them. Move to Perth, guys. Move to Perth.
Absolutely. Perth, the centre of the universe. I just wanted to squeeze one last observation in, because there was this one that came in from Angela saying, do you think Australian superannuation is vulnerable to foreign policy? I would say not just Australian superannuation, but pretty much everything in Australia. Whether you look at it from a migration perspective, whether you look at it from a resources perspective, an investment perspective, we are a cork on this mighty ocean, and trying to think that we can somehow, buttress ourselves against those international policy changes, I think is very misleading. And I'm thinking of, BRICS and what's happening there. I'm thinking of what's happening in China. I'm thinking of what's happening in the US. Those international forces are certainly going to be beyond our control to deal with. So, yeah, absolutely, Australia is vulnerable.
Well, just wait till all these unlisted assets and illiquid assets are properly valued. Holy shit. Look what that's going to do to our 8.88% over 30 years. What a complete crock that is. And what about all the people that took out 20 grand during COVID? We're screwed, guys. Do the best for your family, and that's all you can do. And I'm taking punts. I'm swinging hard now. Why not? Do your research. If not, live comfortably, have your money in the bank, and don't break the law.
Good advice. Jason, thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciated it. And thank you for that. And Tony, I want to say thank you very much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. As always, thought-provoking, concerning, but I think there are some really, really important messages in the current environment. So thank you very much. We'll do it once again in a few weeks' time when things have, morphed on. And if you're over here next year, you're welcome to drop in Bath, and you can have a look at what's going on here locally. So thank you very much.
I'll see you. Yeah, I'll see you in March 2024. I'll duck over from Budapest.
Look forward to it, and we'll have some fun, and hopefully the weather won't be too bad by then. So I'll say thank you very much, Tony. I'm going to take you offline now, and I'm going to close the show. See you soon. Take care.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
So there you are, folks. Hope that was insightful. It's certainly, to my mind, really highlighted some critical issues. And just to say that next week we're going to have Damien Klassen on, and we're going to talk a bit about some of the market stuff there. We'll delve into some of the AI stuff as well, because I think that's a really important conversation, as well as where are the markets going. And as I said a moment or two ago, to my mind, the markets are now set for a very vulnerable few months, I think, given what we're seeing. So that's what's going to happen next week. Meantime, of course, I'll have my other shows coming through from recorded sources. I'm talking to my Friday guest as normal. So Tarek is on Friday, and we're going to explore specifically some of the China-related data that's coming out. So watch out for that. And I also made a show specifically on BRICS the other day, which has gone very well. So if you haven't checked that one out, check it out. Right, final view, the dogs still there, and they've been snoring a bit, but other than that, not moving very much at all. So they're still very much now ready for to be woken up and taken for a walk. So that's my next task. And I want to say thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. Take care, and I'll look forward to talking with you next week on the live show with Damien Klassen. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off. Cheerio.